Uh-huh.
Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of his Storybox podcast. Have you ever wondered why you mind wander? I know I have, and I personally love it. And it turns out it's a good thing because it can improve your mood and boost your creativity. As my guest, Moshe Bar, talks about in his brand new book, Mindwandering. You can go and get a copy anywhere books are sold. Highly recommend this book. But for those of you that need to know more about Moshe, he is the former director of the Cognitive Neuroscience Lab at, get this, Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital, and an internationally renowned cognitive neuroscientist. He has a PhD in cognitive neuroscience from the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. For his outstanding research and academic achievements, he has received many awards and honors as well, including the prestigious 21st Century Science Initiative Award from the McDonnell Foundation and the Hebb Award from the International Neural Network Society as well. Like I mentioned, he has a brand new book out right now. You can go and get a copy of it. But Moshe, can I welcome you so much to the Storybox podcast today, my friend?
Thank you very much for having me.
It's an honor to have you here, sir. I know it is incredibly late, and for my audience, he stayed up until 11 p.m. for us. So everyone can be incredibly more and more grateful for you, my friend. I just wanted to say thank you for that. Very much looking forward to diving further into your backstory, why you do what you do, and talking about this very interesting topic of mind wandering. Before we do that, my very first question for you is a question I love starting off with all my guests. It is, what does success look like for you?
Well, it's definitely domain specific. I don't want to sound boring, right? But there's success, but I'm assuming you're talking about science. So, I'm afraid I don't have a short answer. I have a long answer, but
go for it.
Good data is a kind of local success. You know, if you have a hypothesis and you find that your hypothesis is supported by the data after a complicated process of executing an experiment, or even better, leads you to new territories which you did not expect getting into the experiment. This is, well, scientific happiness, maybe not success, but happiness. But overall, now, as I'm sure we'll discuss further into our conversation, now that I realize links to mood, and we do play with this or study this both in the lab and also in a startup company where we try to alleviate symptoms of depression, the ability to help individuals. By now it sounds a cliche, but when I feel it individually, where we already are able to modify things for people on an individual and a daily basis, it's a huge privilege. So this privilege for now is a success for me, if we indeed succeed.
I like that. I love your research on mood and trying to heal people of depression, because that is a prevalent thing in today's society, and it often comes down to how a person feels. They often feel numb to life almost, and the things that they did do that they no longer enjoy doing anymore. And I know that I've been through that in the past of my life. But I wanted to ask you, in the brain more specifically, where does mood, or what part of the brain initiates the mood? And is it more or less, when it comes down to depression, what actually happens to the brain in terms of our mood, if that question made sense?
It did make sense, but there is some terminology issues that we need to establish. And one of them is that actually it's more than a conceptual understanding of how the brain works. The idea that there is a certain region for doing something is kind of obsolete or somewhat outdated. And we do think about, global networks and things that work in orchestration. And for mood specifically, you can look at different levels. You can look at molecular levels. You can think about what we call neurotransmitters. And everybody's familiar with serotonin or dopamine, right? So these are neurotransmitters directly involved in the regulation of our mood. So a neurotransmitter is everywhere in the brain, right? So this is more like a matter of concentrations and transmission and reception. There are some regions that are in the brain that are more associated with mood than others. And we have to realize in order to examine this or to think for a second, what is mood made of? Because mood is, for example, involved in good feeling, and good feeling is associated with reward. So then you can think about the entire reward system in the brain, both the molecules and the areas and the connections and the activities. So it's more than both. There's at least 4 of them. And that's just for the better or worse mood. But mood is also linked with the way we think, as I elaborate in the book. So if you think associatively and broadly or narrowly and in a more ruminative way, is determined by levels of inhibition, as we call it. So there we know that the prefrontal cortex, the area or the region behind your forehead, the CEO of the brain, so to speak, sends down inhibition to the medial temporal lobe. So we know there is large scale and long distance regions coordinated in achieving, our state, the specific state we're in. So it's really it takes a village.
How about for decision making and ultimately making a choice? Does that come down to ultimately our mood and the kind of chemicals that go on in our brains?
Okay, so it's more the other way around. That is, our mood would affect the way we make our decisions. Okay, so the same decision or you'll make different decisions in the same situation if your mood is different, right? So even what you described before, the what we call anhedonia, that people stop feeling the pleasure for the same activities that they have used to in the past. So if you're in a state of anhedonia and I offer you to go out for a run with me or to come even to the beach or something that's highly attractive, still you'll be reluctant. So your decision to take path A or path B really depends on your state, and mood is a major state and a major, kite runner of our all our decisions.
You talk about in the introduction of your book, which I found was very highly addictive. I encourage people to open up the book. It will draw you straight in. You'll soon see why. But you talk about the states of mind. Are you able to explain what you mean by the kind of states of mind? What are they?
Yeah. So it's kind of a framework we established over the years. And it's not only us, it's kind of a synthesis of a work of from the last couple of decades. The idea, again, is an issue that is almost like, just like mood, state of mind is almost like a household concept, but it's not a well-defined concept. And I would like to refine the way people look at what is their state of mind. Because as we just said in the answer to the previous question, our state affects everything about our being, or most of the things about our being. So our productivity, our happiness, our success, happiness is a big word, but I mean the local mood and feelings. So we found over the years there's a big, or like a pillars of our cognition, and I'll lay them out in a second, tied together. So the way we perceive our world, okay, the way we attend our world physically, if we see the forest or if we see the trees, I think you and your listeners can definitely relate to the fact that at some point, in some situation, we look at the big picture, and some other situations, we look at the details, right? We're different people and at different times, and I'll get back to this. But so the way we examine the world, the way we think, if we think broadly or narrowly, our mood, positive or negative, even our openness to experience, how much we'd like to explore versus how much we'd like to exploit familiar things. All these aspects of our mental being are tied together in what we call, in the construct we call state of mind. And the interesting thing is that it keeps on moving. So it's important that we remember that we are dynamic creatures. And I think to some extent this is trivial, but to another extent, this is also not so intuitive for most of us. So take creativity, for example, which is linked to how broadly associative you are, as I mentioned before. So you think about somebody as creative or not creative, or you think about yourself as creative or not creative. But it's good to know that we are actually, our level of creativity is not destiny. And in different situations, we can be more creative or less creative. And I do mention in the book a few situational elements that can increase or decrease our ability to be creative. So all these things are tied together in a concept we call state of mind, and they move, during the day, depending on context, depending on many other things.
Let me get back to you about the creativity part, because I did want to touch on that later on in the conversation, but I wanted to sort of touch on something that you mentioned there, which fascinated me in regards to happiness. Is happiness a real thing, or is it just a term that we have created regarding our feelings and emotions?
Yeah, this is a concept that actually I'm trying to shy away from in my research, not in my life, because I do think it means, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I do think it means different things to different people. We know it's about feeling good, but then you start thinking about feeling content, feeling satisfied. Is it continuous? Is it the average? Is it inside, or is it depending on context? So I think, with your permission, I want to really get into specifically defining happiness, but good mood is good enough for me, just being in good mood for as long as possible, that's happy enough for me. And whatever floats your boat. I mean, if you can be really happy if your team wins, and you can be really happy seeing your kids grow up. So you see there are different time scales. So happiness properly, there is research, and there's a lot of respect for those pioneers that look into it. And I think the number one researcher of happiness in the world, I'm privileged enough to have him sign, he's endorsing the book there on the cover, Daniel Gilbert. So a leader and doing, some of the most cutting edge work and rigorous work in a field that seems so amorphous. So there is research definitely in happiness, and it's funny, just over my screen here, there's like 10 books with happiness on their title. I can show it to you maybe.
There is too.
right next to depression. So there's a big column of happiness books and a big column of depression books. Maybe it's like, I remember when I was living in the US, I would go to CVS, one of the pharmacy stores, and you stand in line for the cashier, and behind the cashier, there's a giant wall. Half of the wall is cigarettes, and half of the other wall, and the other half of the wall is all kind of chewing gums and means to stop smoking. So it's like, so I feel it's the same here, the depression next to happiness. But I don't think I can tell much to people about happiness that they haven't thought about themselves, in the sense that it's very personal and it means different things, and there's no magic bullet. And
Yeah, I think it's a very broad topic of conversation. A lot of people have tried to explain it as best they possibly can. And I think we could spend forever talking about it and going down a massive rabbit hole, because like you mentioned, there's countless books out there that you can, and I was listening to a podcast even this morning while on my run, a doctor actually has written another book on happiness, like the keys to achieving happiness. And he was talking about core happiness, like you got to have 3 things in order to be, quote, happy or achieve that sense of mood, I guess, that resembles, I guess, a sense of happiness, meaning, purpose, and other things all intertwining into one thing, which I found is a curious thing. But I guess more aligned with your research, I wanted to ask you, how can mind wandering make somebody or enhance their mood in a positive way? And can it do the complete opposite? Like, can it make it negative too?
Right, exactly. So you're touching on an important point here. And I do, if you don't mind, just the tail of the answer to the previous question. So what you mentioned about this book you read, I haven't read it yet, but Viktor Frankl with the Man's Search for Meaning really talks about this whole idea of purpose and meaning. And so I definitely think things are there, but I do like to point out that when I was at Harvard, the number one by far course in popularity was a course with happiness in its topic and its subject, and the same at Yale. So it attracts us, and we're creatures that are, really seeking happiness and kind of at a loss at, what should we do? What should we do to be happy? Or am I doing the right thing? But we're all want to be happy, and there's something both sad and encouraging about the fact that we're generally not happy enough, no matter what. So, and of course, anyway. So mind wandering, and it's already innuendoed in your question. The idea is that there are different types of mind wandering, and you already mentioned or asked whether mind wandering can make you feel good, but also can make you feel bad. So we need to remember that mind wandering is a collection. First of all, it's a collection of processes that are involved, but also there are different types of mind wandering. So you might be mind wandering about a future vacation, kind of running what we call mental simulations of possible locations and how would it feel to vacation there, including even rich details. And you may be ruminating on a bad comment you made last night over dinner. So both cases, these are mind wanderings, but one of them is narrow in scope and it leads you nowhere. And at the end of the day, it actually torments you. Okay. And when people ruminate for extended period, when it becomes chronic, then it's really can develop into pathology or a clinical situation that could be something like depression or anxiety. But the opposite, the broad mind wandering, where you think more associatively and you jump from one thought to another, and I would like to elaborate on this in a second, more broadly and more remotely, the result is creative thinking. And our research and also research done by others shows a close link between how broadly you think and how positive your mood is. And this is exactly what we use in what I mentioned in the introduction when we try to approach mood and mood disorder, that maybe we can change people or people can change the way they wonder, the way they think to a way that's more conducive of a better mood. And if you don't mind, I do want to elaborate on this jumping and this and kind of mental distances. So you can think about everything that you know, everything that you learned, everything that you experienced, all the knowledge you have is connected. It's all connected. It's just a matter of degrees of separation, but it's all connected, and it's connected in a giant semantic network. Okay, so even if Paris and an ant don't sound related, we'll make 4 or 5 steps and we'll be able to connect in your personal network. So when we think and when we wonder, it's akin to walking on this network from one node, let's say Paris, to another node. Okay, let's say patisserie, right? So there's like connection. There are short connections and long connections. So every time we think about thinking and the breadth of thinking, and whether it's narrow and whether it's broad, one can imagine this network and think about long versus small steps and expansive versus circular steps, etc.
What are the neurons in our brain doing when our mind is wandering? And does it change depending on the kind of things that we are wondering about?
So there's a massive network that we discovered, we as a community. It's not all about my research. So it's a massive network that we call the default mode network. And this is the network of regions that apparently, it turned out, and this was a big revelation about 20 years ago, that is very, very active, vigorously active when we're not busy trying to achieve a certain goal. So when you're not interviewing guests or not reading an engaging book or not busy driving really fast and really need all your senses to be in the moment, then the rest of your brain or the available parts of the brain, and it's specifically this network, just grind away. We used to think naively that when we're not doing anything, the brain kind of rests. But it turned out to be extremely active when we're supposedly resting. So it means that really by default we're active, by default we wander. And indeed, it turned out that almost half of our waking hours we wander. You think about it, I can't get used to this fact that half of your waking hours, your mind is not where your body is. It's kind of insane.
How about when we sleep? Is our mind still wandering, or is it finally resting?
Yeah, well, you can call it resting, except REM, the stage where we dream and our eyes move and we're busy with complicated scenarios. Otherwise, mind wandering is really exclusive for waking hours, unless you count dreaming as mind wandering. Yeah.
I think the big question is that people are probably wondering right now is why in the world do we do it? What's the whole point of it?
Yeah. So as someone who is a neuroscientist, I do believe in nature and in the infinite wisdom of evolution, and the idea that if you stumble as a scientist, if you stumble upon a process activity that the brain, specifically in my case of research, does, and it's expensive in terms of time, in terms of energy, metabolic energy that it requires, then there's got to be a reason. It can't be a fluke that, we spend 30% of the brain's energy doing just simulations about vacations. And this logic kind of guided the quest of us as a community to kind of try to understand what is this default activity do? What is this mind wandering include? We all can relate to, oh yes, I wonder all the time. I get a lot of responses after all these interviews and from people who read the book already that they all connect. And I think almost everybody think that they're unique in how much and they're almost embarrassed to admit how much they wonder. And it turns out we're all in this together and we're all wandering away pretty extensively. So that started the quest to understand what's the content. So you mentioned decision-making before. So let's just take decision-making. When you are in some junction for a decision, I'm not talking about big decisions, getting married or not, buying a house or not. Your day is composed of hundreds or thousands of these little decisions, right? I mean, should I shower now or after I do the dishes? Should I take chocolate cake or cheesecake? Every little thing is a junction, even if it doesn't sound critical. And I do think that most of these junctions are not that critical, but we are facing them. So the process that we go through when we have to decide A versus B, your mind runs a quick or long, or depending on the decision, simulation of the possible outcomes. If I go with A, how are things going to unfold? And if I go with B, how are things going to unfold? And the way we know to do this is based on our experience. We already have experienced vacations on a remote location by the beach. So this will be another location, but it's similar in that it's on the beach, similar temperatures. I can lean on my experiences, my memory, to project to the future and try to evaluate to the best of my ability what will be the outcome if I go with A and or with B, right? And then in this moment, you have two different outcomes. And you said, this is the one with the more desirable elements, and I go with B because this is what I want. So do you want to eat now jam or do you want to eat now sardines? Really depend on your state. And in both, both might be good options for you different times of the day, but whatever you want to do now depends on you running a little simulation. How would I feel if I eat this or if I eat that?
What got you interested in studying more about, I guess, mind wandering as a specific topic?
Well, I think many of us in the community that started studying this was both because, I'll start backward. So in the early days of my research, when I started my graduate school in 94, I was interested in how we recognize visual objects. How do you recognize a chair? How do you recognize a TV? How do you recognize a glass? And I teach this now, and not much has changed in those 30 years or so in our understanding of exactly how an object is represented. But I've drifted. I'm a drifter, so I've drifted since, and with the realization that we don't really see objects in our world in isolation. So when you bring subjects to the lab for an experiment on object recognition, you show them on the screen one object at a time. Okay, it's a stove, it's a blender, it's a beach umbrella, right? And we examine how people are recognizing it. But in reality, you have a lot of arrangements, a lot of things, the collections of objects that objects never appear in isolation in our reality. So they are surrounded with other objects. And what's interesting is that they are surrounded with typical objects, with objects that typically appear together. So a stove, as I mentioned before, usually would appear in the same context as a sink and a refrigerator and maybe a little table, right? So the brain connects these things that statistically, we call it statistical regularities, that statistically tend to appear together often, right? So when you think about a stove, you would also think about a refrigerator in some part of your brain, preparing you to what's likely to also be present in the same. So you won't be activating the representation of a samurai sword when you see a stove, because what are the chances of seeing a samurai sword in a kitchen, right? So you kind of activate probabilistically things that are likely to appear in that context, depending on your experience and what you've stored in memory. So then the realization that we play with associations, we rely on associations both for encoding memories and for retrieving memories, but also for using these associations as predictions. You hear the sound of a train, you know to predict that the train will be coming soon. The same with a lightning and the thunder. We learn these associations and we exploit them to increase the certainty of our environment. We do strive on minimizing uncertainty to save ourselves in some modes. In other modes, we explore and we would do want to take chances and risks just to learn and experience new things. But by and large, we're organisms that try to minimize uncertainty, and we do this by trying to foresee what's around the corner. And we do this based on our memories. So when we start looking at how it happens in the brain and where we realize that it really overlaps with the default network and with mind wandering. And we realize that a lot of the processes that take place during mind wandering and in the default mode network is retrieving these associations, connecting them. So even the mental simulation I described before, eating this versus eating that, relies on connecting, how does my body feel after I eat chocolate, right? So there's an association that can help you afterwards calculate, evaluate whether you would like to have chocolate or not.
I think it's fascinating research, and I'm so glad that you actually undertook it and have created this book for everyone, and you simplified it quite a bit in layman's terms for non-scientific individuals like myself to understand it. So I appreciate that.
Thanks.
I wanted to ask you about how does it increase our ability to focus? My friend Johan Hari wrote Stolen Focus, and he does talk about mind wandering in the book, which kind of surprised me a little bit because it kind of feels like you're not really focusing, but it kind of does feel like you're focusing even more. It's a bit of a strange phenomenon, I think. But maybe you can help explain why mind wandering can increase our ability to focus and understand things in the world.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure completely. This is a strong assertion, and I'm the last person to serve as a model for a focused mind. So I don't think that it's something that I can. If more mindfulness meditation, I would say that mind wandering proper is something that helps you focus in the sense that in different, and I'm far from being an expert in meditation, but from the little I've glimpsed and practice, you realize that a lot of what you do is increasing your ability to focus and attend. And much of what happens, think about the workspace that's your brain. a lot of you, it's always filled with thoughts and actions. Some of them are relevant, some of them are just like a monkey going crazy in your mind and just chattering without purpose. So being able to control, to harness this process of thinking, to be more oriented, more conscious and mindful of your own thoughts, can help you focus by the fact that you can reducing the noise and increasing the signal, so to speak. I don't think if you're about to do something that requires a lot of focus, sitting down and mind wandering is definitely going to help you. I think that it's relative and it depends on many things. So I wouldn't say mind wandering is a method for focusing, but it's a method for actually is a way of using your unfocused mind to generate creative ideas and to generate better mood as a positive side product.
How can we better, or what things can we do, I guess, to better control the things that we do tend to wonder about? And I think you also talk about in one of the chapters the lost ability of novelty and why novelty is crucial. Are you able to expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so it's a curious thing because on the one hand, we fear novelty. And I'm sure that if you change the format of your podcast, your listeners would initially would object and will have a lot of things to say until they get used to it. So we are really averse to changes, but at the same time, we are attracted. We are suckers for novelty since we're 1 month old. Okay, so this is actually being exploited by scientists to study babies that are pre-verbal, that they cannot speak yet, but we still want to understand, can they recognize objects, for example? So we play with new versus old just to gain knowledge by the way, with their gaze. So we as creatures are attracted to novelty, period. Even, like it or not, that this is what we do. And the main reason for this is obviously learning. I mean, curiosity and learning are all means to get information, to suck information from our world and put it in our memory. And if you ask why, the answer is that so you can predict and minimize uncertainty in more and more and more situations. Something new, something novel is something you did not expect. So your system freaks out, so to speak. It's like, oh my God, I didn't expect this. Let me augment my existing memory with new information that will allow me then to generate predictions also in these situations which I wasn't able just a second ago. So we're suckers for novelty, really, because it teaches us something, and it in theory can save our life next time when we encounter the same situation. And even advertisers have explored this long time ago. So I mean, the word new on every toothpaste, on every candy, we know that we actually do not get used to it. Every time we see new, we see novel, we are attracted.
I think you're right. In one hand, I understand that we do fear novelty, because I know for me, like I've always got to feel like I've got to be doing something, like I can't not be doing something. And I think you open it up, you're talking about how our brains are always noisy with things happening in and around us, that we kind of lose the ability to be quiet and still and to just focus on, I guess, some other more important things which help build our creativity even more. I guess the thing that I wanted to ask you is there's so much, it's so easy to mind wander about negative things. What are some practical strategies that you've found in your research to stop that from happening? Or is it a good thing to have that happen occasionally? Or because we seem to be doing it all the time, It's just nonstop. So how can we fix that?
So part of the thing I wanted to accomplish with the book is to help people distinguish between different types of mind wandering and just the ability to recognize what they're wondering about. What is it that occupies their mind? And in some cases, when you feel like you're in a good creative streak and thinking about productive and original things, then I really recommend that people stay in bed or stay where they are and continue and not feel guilty about their wandering, because it really serves an important function of making us a creative race. But in other cases where mind wandering seems to be destructive, like in rumination, interesting thing is even if you ruminate on a positive thing, very quickly it becomes a negative thing in some mysterious way. So we kind of manage to find the negative angles of even a positive event if we are in a ruminative mood and type of thinking. So recognizing what type of mind wandering you're engaged in can help you first decide if you want to continue doing this or move on to something else. But affecting the content of mind wandering, there are some methods I mentioned in the book, but our ability is very is limited. People have to remember to keep in mind that mind wandering has a mind of its own, so to speak. We can't tell our mind to start wander. We can't tell it what to wonder about, and we cannot tell it when to stop wondering. It's all spontaneous. It can be triggered by a cue from the outside or from the inside, some thought that occurred to you, and you just go off on a tangent and you go off wandering and kind of disconnected from the situation that you're in. I do play with tricks myself of kind of trying to summon, it sounds mystical, but to summon some topics into my upcoming mind wandering by occupying my mind with things that I would like to wonder about. I would like to incubate, as we call, and be creative about. It could be a problem that bothers me at work. So if I'm just stepping out of the door to go for a run, and I just finished answering some bureaucratic emails or some annoying responses, then I don't want to go and grind on this when I run. So if I read a page of a book I like, or bring back a problem that occupied me and I would like to solve, just reading about it increases the likelihood that it will come up in my wandering mind, but it doesn't guarantee anything.
You open, like I was mentioning before, you opened the book in a particular way, which I found fascinating. You were talking about how a lady loves mind wandering, essentially, or thinking about her deepest, darkest fantasies, sex fantasies, essentially. And that can, for a lot of people, if they're thinking about that sort of thing, it can bring about, I guess, a sense of shame because they don't want other people to know about it. And on the one hand, it's kind of it's an interesting thing because it kind of boosts the mood in one sense as well. But this is just my mind trying to piece it all together. I found it all fascinating, Moshe. So yeah, bear with me here. But I guess the question I did have for you in sort of wrapping up this conversation, because I know I've got to let you go to bed. My apologies. But is mind wandering, is that essentially just creativity in action?
Well, it depends. This is the bedrock of creativity. So in order to be creative, to find a creative solution for a problem, or just to incubate a creative thought, you do need a process to take place. And part of the process is what we call divergent thinking. So you can think about a creative process like a diamond. So it opens up and then closes. And when it opens up, this is the divergent thinking. And this is when you mind wander or generate ideas in all directions. It's just like a healthy brainstorming session where I recommend to people I consult on brainstorming how there should not be a boss in the room that tells this is a good idea, this is a bad idea, this is a stupid idea, this is an excellent idea. Everything goes at this stage. And the same goes for your brain. When you're in a search for creative thought, everything goes. There's no stupid stuff. And then there's the other direction of this diamond, which is the convergent thinking. And now it's time to evaluate all these ideas that that your mind proposed to you, so to speak, initially, and see which one is the best one out of those divergent ideas. So at some point, we do need to become practical, but just before that, we need to wander away and be expansive in our thinking. So definitely mind wandering can be the main tool for creativity, but it's also the main tool for the thoughts that can torment us and can cause rumination. So it's a highly potent process we have instilled in us, and we need to learn and hone in on the way we utilize it, the way we exploit our mind wandering to our benefit, and not let it handle us and kind of manage our happiness.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. People can get the book wherever books are sold. Mind Wandering, How It Can Improve Your Mood and Boost Your Creativity. I'll make sure everyone knows where to get a copy of this book. I cannot recommend it enough. It is the first book of its kind. Trust me when I say that. I think a lot of people are going to love reading this book, Moshe. So thank you so much for writing it. Is there anything that you felt like that you didn't write about or that you've missed at all in terms of mind wandering? Like, did you lead off thinking that you're going to write a part 2 book?
Yeah, I left. Yeah, all the heroes are still alive at the end, so it's we'll have a sequel.
Hey, I can't wait. That is going to be very exciting. It is a relatively shorter book, to be honest. I think it's only like 170, 180 something pages long from memory.
Actually, it just came out today as audiobook as well. I know many of my friends stopped reading and like to listen to things while they work out. So today is the birth of the audio version. Very exciting.
Well, everyone knows where to get books these days, and same with audiobooks, Audible, you name it. But where can they connect with you, Moshe? Where do you want people to connect with you?
Well, I think on the cover of the book, it gives my, all the social media stuff. But I think if you type my name, Moshe Bar, on Google, I think I'm I will appear at some point.
He's not hard to find, people. I'll tell you a quick story. I actually walked into my local Dimick store and happened to come across this book, and I took a photo of it, and I'm like, this is a fascinating thing. So I decided to buy myself a copy of it, reach out to you, and then lo and behold, we're talking today. So I've got a second copy of your book that I'll give away for a lucky person later on. But Moshe, my final question for you, this is my all-time favorite question I ask everyone at the end. It is a hypothetical one, but I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of argument. They've been able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
There was a very good sci-fi movie with Robin Williams that they were editing. There's a memory chip, and his role was after somebody's passed away, that to edit a little film out of the memory of the entire. So you would watch people's entire life. I love this idea. I think it will be. I don't know. You're asking deep questions that I haven't thought about thoroughly myself. I don't know. It almost sounds like I'll need to stage the memories, or kind of direct their memories. I want it to be more, like maybe a white screen, and let them each project and wonder about the memories they have of me, or whatever, Yeah.
Oh, I like that. That is really good. I mean, if your family knows you, then even better. Let them do the work. Why allow them to? Yeah, why you do it for them?
Exactly.
That is so cool. Okay, well, Moshe, thank you so much for your time, for writing this book once again, and for everything that you're doing and putting out there in the world. I can't wait for the second book to come out too. Maybe we'll have a second conversation in the future. But thank you so much for joining me today on the Storybox podcast.
Thank you, Jay. I enjoyed speaking with you.